Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today to the September 15th Operations Committee meeting. We can get started with the capital. I didn't have my agenda up. The Capital Improvement Program presentation.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let me just get it pulled up here and share my screen. Okay, can you all see it?
Yes.
Wait,
Yes.
let me get it into presentation. It's because it's not. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you. I'm Cindy Smith. I'm the Director of Design and Construction, and I will be presenting the CIP this year. So, there we go. Okay, so it's a very long presentation, so I'll try to abbreviate where I can, but we'll be going over things like the background, the funding review request, how we identify and prioritize projects, previous CIP project status, then the goals for this year, how we allocate our local expenditures, and then other funding sources and projects, and then state initiatives. And then finally, the decision point and the timelines for the CIP. So as background, the CIP provides a 6-year plan that identifies public school construction funds needs and establishes the schedule for funding and implementing the projects. It consists of requests for the budget year for FY22, as well as a rough plan for anticipating requests for the following 5 years. We submit the CIP to the IAC, the Interagency on Public School Construction, Interagency Commission on Public School Construction every year at this time, and we include projects that are used to address capacity, to support educational initiatives, as well as to improve building performance and to address facility priorities. So putting the CIP in context, because we use a lot of acronyms around here, everything that you see on the one side goes into the CEFMP, and then part of those things go into the CIP. So for example, we work with the Office of Enrollment and Achievement and Accountability, as well as Enrollment Choice and Transfer, Pupil Transportation, to develop the CEFMP. We also use that information to develop the CMP, which is the Comprehensive Maintenance Plan. We use that to work with academic programs, and then we use that in portfolio analysis. And then all of that stuff goes into how we develop the CIP, which then provides the budget schedules for those projects that we need to complete in our school facilities. So all of these things all do tie together, but they are separate plans. So when you see the CMP and the CFMP and the CIP all being presented, they're different plans, but they all are used in conjunction with each other to develop the CIP. So to go over, again, how some of those things all tie together then, the CIP is for capital construction projects. So capital construction projects are defined as things that are over $200,000. They have to be in buildings that are utilized more than 60%. They have to have a lifespan of 15 years. And for us, our annual average state allocation of new funds is $28 million. We also get an additional $19 million as a local match from the city. To separate that from the CMP, the Comprehensive Maintenance Plan, the FY21 operating budget for the Facilities Maintenance and Operations Department was $33.7 million. So that is separate money that's supported by general funds. It is not capital funds, and capital funds are completely separate then from the general funds. And then separate from all of that is the 21st Century Buildings Program, which as currently set is to renovate or replace the 23 to 28 buildings. And just to note, we do have 153 buildings currently in the portfolio. So based on that, so you can kind of see the overall need, our total replacement cost is currently estimated for all of the buildings in the portfolio at about $5 billion. And based on a state of schools reports, to maintain that replacement portfolio cost, we should be investing capital money to the tune of about $200 million per year for systemics, for educational enhancements, basically just to support that $5 billion portfolio that we own. And as you can see, when we're only receiving roughly, $50 million from the state and city combined, we're only receiving about a quarter of what we actually would need to really invest in what we need for our facilities. And then just to kind of put that in tune with other LEAs in the state, our state and local contribution for FY16, 17, and 18 is the green on the left-hand side. The state has been roughly equal for all of us, and Anne Arundel and Baltimore County tend to get a little bit more, but from the state, but they have a lot more local match that comes into play for them, so they can invest a lot more in their districts annually than we can. So as you can see, for example, in FY, so the total over FY 16, 17, 18 for Anne Arundel County was $655 million. And the total for us for the capital budgets for those 3 years combined was $184 million. So there's a huge disparity there.
How did the size of the districts compare in terms of building?
Well, I do not know the statistics for that one off the top of my head. I do know that Baltimore County is slightly larger than us. Not significantly, slightly. Anne Arundel, let's see, I believe it's only PG and Baltimore that are larger than us. So Anne Arundel is actually smaller. So, yeah.
And the conditions of their buildings are much better too. So they're starting,
yes.
Our building portfolio is by far the worst in the state. So the conditions that we're beginning with are much, much worse.
Right.
So just to kind of go over some of the things that have affected us in the past and still do affect us for our capital funding program. As we've mentioned, the local funding is less for us than for others. So we do have limited local funds due to a limited tax base. Our CIP tends to address more systemic projects than major projects because we just have such a backlog of systemic needs. And in addition to that, other LEAs can forward fund projects. So because they have more money coming locally, they are able to go ahead and design a project and bid it and get that price in before they actually submit it for the state for funding. So they know how much it's going to cost. Whereas for us, our local match barely keeps up with what we're getting. So we're constantly just designing. We can't design until we actually start, until we actually get the funds for the project, because the money from the previous year has already been used. So there isn't any money to use to get ahead of that cycle. So for us, then that kind of also then leads into why sometimes we rescind projects. If a project comes in, once it's designed and bid, significantly over what the state has awarded for that project, more than what we estimated that when we originally requested it. If it is a significant amount, we often would have to rescind that because we do not have the local funds to make up the difference to be able to move forward with that project. And then that rescissions then tie into the recycled contingency. When we rescind a project, that goes into what is called a statewide contingency fund. Now that fund is designated, if we rescind a project, is designated in our name for us, but it is in that statewide contingency fund. And in the past, the state has recycled our contingency into our CIP award. So instead of giving us new funds for projects, they say that it's new and give us money that was already there for a project that we'd had to cancel. So that has impacted what our new fund average is. And that new fund average is what they're now basing current awards on. So for example, we've had about $118 million in reduction in new funding over the last 10 years. And so that now has significantly impacted what that average of new funding is that they are now calculating for what they will award the new funding for this coming year and years as in the foreseeable future.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question about this every year.
Yes.
I don't quite think I fully understand it, but it's clear that what's happening is money that we expected to receive was, I guess you call the project rescinded. That money goes into a pot that's controlled by the state. The state has used that money for our annual CIP allocation, calling it new money. I thought that we had made some success on that issue a couple of years ago, and that they were no longer doing that.
So the bill that was passed says that they cannot recycle unless we ask them to. It also says that they can't. I'm trying to remember exactly how it was worded. It will come to me in a second, but they
partial fund. Is that what
thanks. That's the one I'm thinking of. Yes, they can't partially fund unless we request it, because that's been the other part of it. But we didn't even mention partially funding. But because the recycling has already happened, even if they can't do that, it's built into what they're using to base their average on for the next several years. So because that recycled funding had already happened, they're basing their decisions for what they're going to fund us for this year, next year, you know, and for the foreseeable future on an average of what the new funds were in the past. And since that recycling had already happened, then that reduced our new funding, which now then impacts how much money we will be awarded currently and in the foreseeable future.
So while the not Commissioner Frank, to your point, they did understand this issue. We made presentations around this. We talked about the multi-year impact of this. At that time it was a $60 million impact over the past few years of this recycled funds on us. I think it was 60, and now it's well above 100 million. And the not Commission understood that. They put in changes to prevent counting recycled funds to our total, and then when the IAC implemented that, they implemented it by figuring out our new allocation by looking at our average for the last few years of new money, which was the very years when this was happening. So technically, they're not doing it anymore, but they calculated our new percentage by using the very years that were impacted by the practice that the not Commission identified as being something that they believe to be inequitable. But that is not. So the way the IAC implemented it was just making permanent that share. And so, yeah, we've been living with it ever since.
Yes.
Okay.
Help make anything clear? It's a very confusing thing.
It's not. I understand more. It's not.
Okay.
I might have some additional questions, but I'll just submit them in writing.
Okay.
Thanks.
So then, based on that, for that average new funding, because wealthier LEAs receive already significantly higher local funds, they also didn't have that same recycled contingency issue. So now if you look at it, say to Baltimore County, their average new funding based on their previous funding is about $31 million, whereas we're still stuck at 28. So we're getting less money from the state. We are less wealthy. We have the limited local, so we are again, hit by that challenges of funding for our capital projects. In addition, we have other programs that have impacted the CIP in the past. Increasingly, state funds are going to various specific programs and that apply to other LEAs than ours. For example, the Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classrooms funds gave $75 million of the CIP from FY21 to other LEAs. We were not eligible because we were not growing as they are. So that was for growth districts, and that actually took off a 10% funds right off the top of our CIP that then we had to make up for with our local funds. They literally just said at 90% that was all we were going to get. that 100% was not going to happen. And so to move any projects forward that year, we had to fund that with our local money. So, you know, that has also then impacted where our local funds have had to stretch to, the limitations on the state funding that we've received. And then honestly, that also would impact the new funding that we would receive from that year, which then would average into the new funding then for the following years. So all of these things impact how we receive our funding and what funding we receive. So going into this year's CIP, so this year we wanted to really prioritize projects based on the facilities conditions assessments. So maintenance has been running in conjunction with getting data into our school dude, our computerized maintenance management system. We've been doing a facility condition assessment of all of our buildings. It's been going on for about 4 years now, pretty much all caught up, but to capture all of our assets and put them into the CMMS, we've been doing all these condition assessments to capture all of the systems that are in those buildings. And then as well as that, it then ranks the buildings conditions from excellent to fail. So what we did was we reverse ordered them. So anything that was in, failing or poor condition, we put as priority to work our way down the list to try to make sure we were focusing the most on the worst conditions in the district. Just to note, the 21st century buildings are not included in the FCAs because they're all new or renovated buildings anyway, and the timing of the study just didn't include those. And this data is available on the City Schools website if you want to dig into any of the particular assessments. But so for our projects this year, we identified the specific needs based on that FCA as a priority. And then we talked to maintenance about the condition of systems. We did decide we wanted to focus on a multi-systemic focus rather than trying to hit one system in one place and another system in another. We really just wanted to wrap up as much as we could in one building, get as much as we could done with the life cycle, so that building would then be considered really improved. And then, to go on down the line. We also did add some academic use spaces to our program, to our projects list this year, specifically this year around toilet room upgrades, because we do have some pretty poor conditions in our bathrooms and across the district. So we wanted to upgrade the bathrooms in the buildings. So we wrapped those into the multi-systemic projects. Then we rated all those projects based on the condition, how it aligned with our facility plans, the financial impact they would have, and everything was given a score. Then we again look at the condition of the systems for work orders, make sure that everything aligns with the CEFMP and the portfolio, and then we write the scopes and the estimates and come up with an total prioritized CIP list with the scores taken into effect, the goals taken into effect, and the conditions of the buildings taken into account. Is
there an equity scan as part of this as well?
I will get to that in just a bit.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Also, this is Bundima. I have a question real
Yes.
quick, not a lot. When you score and you rate all of these facilities, firstly, this is not new. You've been doing this through the years. This is not a new project. Do you keep a record of the poor and the failed? You have a record of the ones that you have listed as poor and failed.
Yes.
But do you also keep a record of when you repair or when you correct or when it's resolved? For example, if you list one of the schools as poor or failed this year, do you keep a record of when all of that was repaired or when it was done? Or because I'm sure if you've been doing it through the years, you still through the years have poor and failed list. Do you show that has been corrected in the year that it was corrected or the time, the date? Does that school stay on that list over, how long does that school stay on the list? I'm just curious to see, because when you list something that's poor or failed, I'm really curious is how long does it take to pull them off that list?
Well, so what you have to keep in mind is that the FCA is a point in time. an assessment. It's not something that gets updated again for, another 5 to 10 years. So even if we replace the system and it gets recorded in the CMMS as being replaced, we know it's been replaced. The condition assessment, since that's a point in time thing, doesn't change until the next time that is updated. So we can't change the score of it since that's the assessment. We can only change in our records that we've actually upgraded those systems already.
So if it's on that list originally, and you have made corrections, we won't see that you've made those corrections until 5 years later. Is that what you're saying?
So the only way we can see that we've made those corrections by saying, okay, well, we've worked at school X, right? And it may say failed, it may say that it was a poor condition, but in the meantime, we have now replaced the HVAC system, we've replaced the roof, we replaced the windows. So it wouldn't be that score. However, we wouldn't know what that new score is until the next FCA is done.
So if it hasn't been done, it could remain poor for 5 years.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to interject quickly and say, Ms. Smith, if you could wrap around 11:05 since we started late, so we can allow for additional questions from the commissioners.
Okay, I'll try to speed it up.
Thank you.
We still got quite a few to go. So just briefly, we always kind of go over where we stand with the existing projects that we have before we move on to the new ones. So briefly, I'll just hit the highlights for FY21's CIP projects, which were the ones that would have been approved in May of this year. We had 15 total projects that were funded. We are in the beginnings of design for 11 of them, but we actually are already moving into construction for 3 of them, which is actually really, really good for us. We aren't usually in the construction phase this early in projects for those. Just to note, we did also add the Healthy Schools funds and the $15 million HVAC funds, which I'll talk about in more detail in a little bit, but we've added the status of those to these projects so you can kind of see how many projects we're running at a given time and the status of each one of those. And as far as major projects, we do have several major projects that we submit in the CIP, as well as the systemics. So Holabird and Graceland, which I believe you all are aware, just opened this year, and we're really super excited about those as our first zero net energy schools. So we still do have to demolish the existing buildings. We'll be starting the abatement within the next week to those, and then do the field work. But the new buildings are occupied, and everybody is in love with them. Following those, then, we have already submitted Armistead Gardens and Marie Fairing for funding requests. They have received planning award money from the state, which means that, we can start design. They have not received construction funding, but the schedules for those is we would anticipate Armistead Gardens, which would be a renovation and addition. We would anticipate occupying that building in December of 2022. Marie Fairing, which is a renovation of an historic church building. It's an annex site project, so it would be an annex to the existing school, intended for pre-K to 1 students, and we'll be renovating the existing church building and then adding an addition on there for classrooms. So we're anticipating occupying that building in August of 2022. And then we've added Furley and Northeast to the list of major projects that we're now proposing. Furley and Northeast are currently both in the Thurgood Marshall building as really a swing space for them. Furley was moved out a few years ago now because of the structural issues with its existing building. And Vanguard, which is supposed to go into Northeast, has been waiting for that building, the Northeast building, to be renovated. So they've been sitting in the Thurgood Marshall building waiting for us to be able to renovate the Northeast building. So these 2 projects are currently being submitted in the CIP for funding. We do have some support from the state on these, and we do have some reserve contingency money actually set aside for Furley already for projects that we were going to do in that existing building that then we pushed and canceled so that we could then do the new building instead. The proposed occupancy for the new Furley building, because that would be a replacement building, would be September of 2025. And Northeast, which would be a renovation of that existing school, is September of 2023. So with all of those, our key goals for this year were funding for those major projects. Year 5 of 5 of the air conditioning projects, we are down to the last of the air conditioning projects. There's 2 buildings left to go in for air conditioning funds. Unfunded requests from last year's CIP, so the projects that were granted as C projects, which meant that there was not money for the projects. And then new projects that we identified per the prioritization process that we talked about earlier. And that boils down into 4 major projects, 7 AC and HVAC. So it's not just those 2 AC projects, but several HVAC systems as well. A boiler, 8 elevators, 1 fire safety, 7 multi-systemics. So multi-systemics are ones that would include multi-systems, roof and windows, roof and HVAC, could be all 3 of those systems. Any combination of systems that we might need in the building to really bring it, all of the systems up to the standards that they should be. 3 roofs and then 1 structural for a total of 32 projects in the FY22 CIP request. And monetarily, that breaks down like this. As you can see, the major projects really take up the bulk of it. And then we have the FY21 projects that were not funded, the AC projects, and then the largest bulk is new requests. That dashed line there, we put in there to kind of show where our average, the $28 million average that we annually typically receive, where that kind of falls on that graph. That doesn't mean that that's how the state's going to fund things. That just shows that kind of graphically how the money would work out. They do kind of pick and choose which projects that they're going to fund, even though we put them in a priority order. To answer the question regarding the equity lens, we do review the CCI scores, the Community Condition Index scores, as well as geographic locations when we're identifying the projects. However, we base our projects on the emergent needs and life cycles and the facility conditions. But we do make sure that we are graphing them and considering that equity lens across the board as we're looking at that. I would say that we're pretty well distributed across the district again this year. With 7 projects then in low investment, and then 7 and 8 in the next levels, and then 10 in the high investment areas, as well as across the quadrants of the city. As you'll see, it's 8, 7, 11, and 6, depending on the quadrants that it is. But again, this is a review level as we look at the projects after we've identified them, but we do really prioritize them more based on really the needs of the facility and the conditions of the building and the conditions of the systems first. So all of that boils down to a request from the state of $107 million, and from the city is 19, for a total of $126 million. We always request, just to put it out there, we always request more than we're going to get, because this also gives us projects that we can then reuse that reserve contingency for. If they approve projects and they give it a specific status and we just don't have the money for it, if we do have to, and we've had money in the recycled contingency pot, or if we've had to rescind something, we can then use that money to apply to a project that is approved and just didn't have the funding. So we do always request more projects than we have, and we also want to show the actual need that we have, and this is our need. So we want to show that that's what our need is. Just so that we're aware, our local money, we use it for hard costs for construction. We currently have to match 9%. We use it for contingency, for the AE costs, construction management costs, and then we also use it for things like if we have to put in like some of these summer moves that we do, and temporary AC if we need to do that, as well as unforeseen project costs like hazardous materials, which is always a big unforeseen places until we get into construction. And just briefly, because I know I'm running out of time, I want to hit on a couple of our initiatives that we've got other than CIP. Air conditioning projects, when we started the air conditioning initiative, we were started at 75. We are now down to 43 non-air conditioned schools, with many in construction right now. We are actually looking at, let's see here, about, I think I counted up 15 were in construction the last time I counted at the moment. So this kind of breaks down where we stand. Remember, the air conditioning plan includes all the projects that we're going to have air conditioning through whatever means necessary. So whether it was a CIP project for the entire building, like Graceland and Holabird, or whether it's 21st century projects, that's however it's going to get air conditioned. The funds, though, that we show here for the 100 million for the total for the air conditioning plan is just for the air conditioning. So like the HVAC and the vertical package units we've been installing. But we're getting the air conditioning in no matter how, whatever we need to do. So we're requesting the last two projects for this year in this year's CIP. And there is a list of all the schools in the appendix and their status on the air conditioning, for anybody who wants to dig into that more. Additionally, we have some other funding, other state funding initiatives that we've been completing projects through. The school safety grant, this has been primarily maintenance led, but we've received 1 million for the first round and then almost $1 million on the second round. And we've used this money for projects including secure and lockable classroom doors, security technology, the card reader type things, access control projects. So all of this has been allotted at this point. We're waiting to see if there'll be more for that, but we're finishing up those projects. For the 15 million HVAC funds, this was a bill for just city schools that gave us $15 million that could be used for both design and construction. And normally capital money can't be used for design. So this fund's covered everything. Could not affect our CIP allocation and was in response to that winter that we had such all the HVAC problems. It was supposed to be for not necessarily full HVACs, but to hit major, where we've had major issues. So we have 18 projects approved, and from the previous slide where we showed status, almost everything is in construction right now. I believe we have 3 left in design. And then healthy school funds, the first year we received $10 million. The way that worked is Healthy Schools Funds was $30 million that was awarded with no more than $15 million per LEA. Only the first year of funding for this has been awarded right now. It's my understanding that the future funding is tied into bills that currently have not been signed into law, so we don't have funds yet for any future ones. We did receive 6 projects through the Healthy Schools Funds, and 5 of them are in construction at the moment, and everything that we received funding for was for air conditioning. So air conditioning is going into 5 schools from Healthy Schools Funds. Lastly, I have 2 slides left, so I wanted to hit on 2 of the state initiatives and how this is going to impact us in the future. The state has recently passed something called gross area baselines and has approved this. And this is to determine the state funding participation in facilities for new and major renovations. So it has a significant impact, or potential to significantly impact, our major projects and addition projects, because a variance would be needed if from the IAC, if the square footage from our educational specification exceeds the gross area baseline that the state determines that is needed based on the type of school and number of students planned. So we will just have to, keep an eye on this and how we do our ed specs, and possibly be applying now for variances for any of our major projects and additions where our needs might exceed what the state considers their funding participation level. In addition, they have also created something called the total cost of ownership calculator, which is an estimator of the total cost of ownership of a building that applies industry standards for maintenance to the initial cost of construction. However, it really only works if you have the budget in your district for full maintenance and operations of those buildings based on those industry standards. So while it's intended to show if we can afford the building that's proposed, it doesn't really do that, because it also assumes that we have a lot more in our maintenance and operations budget than we actually do. So We're not sure how this one might pull out yet and, affect our buildings, but there is potential there that might affect any major projects and additions as well. Finally, timeline. This is my last one. So we're in the process of submitting. We would need, actually, I guess I have one more. We need approval by the board at the in the last meeting of this month. So the meeting that is on the 22nd, because we have to submit the CIP on the 7th of October, and it has to have board approval before it goes in. Then we start to receive decisions in January. We'll get a first round of decision and appeal, then possibly a second round of decisions with the 75% budget approval, and then in between February and April, and it really totally depends on the IAC what time frame that happens. It could happen all the way into April. We get 90% of the capital budget and what those projects might be, and then right around May is when the 100% comes in, as well as if there's anything like contingency funds, and then we would start launching the projects based on what was funded. So ultimately, we would like to recommend approval of the FY22 CIP, which is a request from request for $107 million from the state for 32 projects to provide funding for the many needed school construction projects for Baltimore City schools. And I apologize for having to speed up and accelerate through that end there, but I hope I got through it all. And that's it. I would like to take any questions you might have at this time.
Madam Chair?
Sure. I'd like to open it up. Commissioner Bondima.
Well, I had several questions, and some of my questions were answered as you moved through the PowerPoint. So since in the interest of time, I will submit my questions to our board director and get them to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
quick question. Just a question about the funds that have been allocated, or have they, for the high schools design and construction. Where would they fall within the CIP, or is that considered 21st century?
It's 21st century. The high school plan would be 21st century. And with House Bill 1, it is not related to the CIP at all.
Okay, thank you.
I have one last question. For the gross area baselines, we approved, I believe on the August 28th meeting, the educational specifications. How does that play a part in these guidelines and moving forward for the gross area baselines?
Sure. So you may recall she had one slide, and I couldn't actually watch that presentation, but I know I watched it when she presented it to Ops, where she had a slide that kind of showed what the changes were and then what the state said. That's how it plays in. So in some cases we're quite in line and actually under, and in some cases it's a little bit over, but it really depended on that educational program for the school. And remember, those are like those are the prototype ed specs. Each school is made, like an ed spec is made for each school for that particular program. So depending on what that ed spec then comes out to for each school, will then really take into account whether we have to go back and ask for a variance or anything like that for being off of the gross area baseline.
Got it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yep. So we tried to keep that in mind when we were updating the ed specs, but there in some cases we just need some additional things that the state doesn't really consider. Like we have honestly a lot more offices for supports for our students than the state has really put into their gross area baselines. So so that's one of the things that we've got. So, in that case, or supports for ESOL students, for example, are one of those as well. I apologize for the noise in the background. I'm realizing that how loud that actually is. So we tried to build that in and factor that in as much as possible. And then as well, we just know we might just have to go back for a variance depending on what the needs are for each school.
Okay.
Hey,
Are there any other? Absolutely. Commissioner Reed.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. I guess first is a question. Historically, we've asked for more than we get. We're asking for 107 million. theory has it we'll get somewhere between 25 and 30. I'm just forward thinking. Can they continue to give us what we get or more money, even when the state's having shortfalls in funding? That's my first question, because I'm pretty dubious about the 107. I'm sure you are too. If you got 30, that's probably what you would hope to expect to get. But I guess my question is, how tough is it going to be for you going forward? And the other thing was going to page 8. I don't know how quick you can pull up page 8. What can we do politically and socially to get the state to realize that, I can't say it's a regressive process, but it's all mostly a function of the state saying, I'm flatlining everybody in every district. The state's flatlining everybody. And because we're a poor district, in reality, we don't have the local funding. So we get killed local funding, we only get 19 million. And other jurisdictions pay a lot more. So how can we get the people in Annapolis to come up with a more fair process for Baltimore City kids?
So I'm happy to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You want me to start and then you add in?
Please.
Okay. So it is something we talked to our delegation in Annapolis about a lot. There is an effort right now that Cindy can talk to you better than I can about doing a statewide review of the conditions of buildings that is supposed to influence the way dollars are allocated. I mean, I will admit to having a healthy dose of skepticism about, how that works will depend greatly on what they measure. And so if they measure, factors that are helpful to systems that are growing, like Montgomery County, if they measure a lot of like overcrowding factors, or there's also ways that they can measure. I mean, we've had discussions about this. The last time a system has been addressed, if they're treating that most recent work on a system as the same, when our work on systems is almost never a complete replacement of a system. It is a patchwork of a system that's years past its lifespan. But whereas another system, at the end of its lifespan or right around it, they'll replace the entire system. So we don't replace the chiller, the boiler, the pipes and all that. We do one piece of it at a time and patchwork it. And so, one conversations we've had is that if they're going to count that the same as like a part of the work as that the system was last touched on this date, and our touching it versus another system touching it is very, very different, that would disadvantage us. So we're trying to keep an eye on that and make sure that the way it's measured is going to give a fair, really a fair picture of the disparity between the buildings in different jurisdictions. But like I said, I have a healthy dose of skepticism whether we'll come out with a meaningful way to differentiate. I mean, it is. I mean, you said you didn't want to call it regressive. It is regressive. I mean, it is at least the Thornton formula, while it's outdated for the general funds, while it's outdated and hasn't been kept up with inflation, it was designed to be progressive. It was designed to make up the difference between the systems that have higher property tax and the ones that have lower property tax. That is the state's role. That is not the way the system was designed, and it has never functioned that way. And so it really should be directing resources to those jurisdictions that do not have the local tax base, and it doesn't do that. And so we have to keep pushing on that. I mean, another piece, frankly, that's part of this would be the Bradford lawsuit, is to try to point out this inequity that has perpetuated for a long time. I mean, so in that other slide that Cindy showed, the 3-year impact of the disparity, when this level of disparity has really existed since about the 70s, the late 70s. And so when you go back that far and you think about the implication on systems, it is no wonder we have a $5 billion backlog. You cannot keep up with other systems when they're getting, the magnitude of multiple times of the investment each year that we are, there is no way. I mean, I have the utmost admiration for our operations team and the efficient way that they really try to use the resources that we have and keep them in good shape, and the CIP work that that Cindy and her team does. But there, there's no level of expertise or efficiency or working till 10 o'clock at night every night, which I know Cindy does. You can't do that and make up this gap. There is no way you can make up this level of gap. And so at some point, it has to be addressed at the state level.
Thank you, ladies.
And to answer the question about the 107 million, we know we will not get 107 million. I mean, that it would be a miracle, and I think we would all jump up and down and, maybe faint even, because we, in excitement, because we would never have seen that before. We request that because, number one, we do want to show, and we do this every year. We always request, honestly, somewhere around $100 million. We want to show that that is our need, that despite the fact that they continually underfund us, that is the need that we have for the projects that we need to do, and that our need is usually even greater. That's just where we kind of cut it off internally. We do also want to have more projects that they've at least reviewed, because if, for example, we had to rescind, I'm trying to think of an example. If we had to rescind Furley, if we hadn't gotten them to agree to allow us to use that rescinded money that's now in the recycled contingency fund to apply it to the construction of the new Furley, we could have used that for another project that was reviewed and approved by the state in the CIP and just didn't have the money allocated to it. So they give all projects an A, a B, or a C, right? An A means that it's approved and it is funded and there's money for it. A B means that it's approved, but there isn't money for it this year. And the C means it's just not approved. So any projects that got a B in the previous 2 years, you can use money from your recycled contingency fund to then come back and request that then we fund that project. So let's just say they gave us the first 15 projects on the list, number 16 gets a B, and somehow or another we had to cancel something from FY19, so there's still money sitting in the recycled contingency fund. We could now go back and say, okay, well, we'd like to take this money from the recycled contingency fund and apply it to this B project to give us another project for the year. And I mean, so that's why we do it. That is why we show, and they don't always approve the projects in the priority order that we submit them. So we submit 34 projects, 32 projects. They could fund the first 15, or they could fund 15, but that might include 1, 4, 7, 9, whatever. So again, if we want something earlier in the pot and they give that one a B, it might not be the 16th project. It could be literally number 4 on the list that then got a B, that then we could come back and say, okay, well, we want to do that project. That was important to us. So we want to use the recycled contingency money for that. So we do strategically request more money than we know we're going to get. Additionally, everything that doesn't get funded will actually form the baseline for next year's CIP. So, we'll have had the scopes and everything all prepared and ready, so that if some miracle happens and there's some healthy schools money that, that comes available, we can also submit projects, that are scoped and budgeted through those funds as well. So we do request more than we know we'll get, in some hopes that we might actually get some of those at some points.
Thank you so much, Cindy and team.
Thank you.
So our next presentation will be the ERP assessment and selection presentation.
All right. To share.
Good morning, everyone. This is Anand, IT Director Applications. Today I have our team, Ms. Watkins, who is our IT manager, who is leading a project manager for this ERP project upgrade from City School side. And also we have Plan More on team, Ms. Melissa Miller and Marvin Sawyer, who are joining today. Just a quick background about this project. City Schools, we awarded like $20.6 million towards this project to replace our existing 20 years old ERP system. And as a part of the initial phase, we released and issued an RFP to manage this project. And Plan Moran was awarded $1.6 million to manage this project. The scope and services will be presented during the presentation. And me and Tylish will address any questions or anything related to this project. And now back to Ms. Miller.
All right, I am going to share the presentation. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right and see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. All right, so we'll get started. So this is a status update of where we stand on the ERP assessment and then assessment and selection project, which is the first component. Then it moves into an implementation effort. So we're just going to show you the team, talk about the project scope and approach, give you a little bit of background on the ERP landscape today in K-12, and then timeline and next steps. Answer any questions at the end, but I'm happy to have you interrupt and ask. I don't see the participant screen right now, so if somebody can help me monitor if anybody is looking to ask a question, that'd be great. So this is the team leading the effort. Judy Wright's our partner. Marv Sawyer's joining us today as her fill in for this meeting. Marv's a principal in our organization and has extensive K-12 experience. Chris Carr and myself are the primary consultants on this project. We're supported by Ivy Anderson and Alex Dietrich. The structure of the whole project for the selection and implementation, you have an executive committee which consists of your chiefs. Ty Watkins is the project manager. There's a selection committee that's being pulled together right now. That consists of the leads of all of the different teams that are in this bottom box under functional teams. And then we've got the procurement and legal group. We're working directly with myself as a project manager for Plant Moran and the consulting team that I showed on the prior slide, supported by Judy Wright, who is our project director on this. One thing I did want to point out to you is these functional teams do show you the scope of the different areas who are involved in this ERP module selection. So we've got the core finance, we've got all of your core human capital, as well as your payroll, time and attendance, and the procurement functions. All right, so just an overview of the project. So why are you looking at a new ERP? So the ERP is to determine and select the best replacement ERP for the current system that you're using, which is Oracle eBusiness Suite, and then implement that new selected ERP to allow for better integration between all of your internal teams. Why are you replacing it? The current system is 20 years old. There have been performance issues with it over the 20 years and a lot of manual intervention that is required by the teams today. There's different modules you've had to bring in, different reporting modules to fill these gaps and give you the ability to have more automated functionality, but that integration causes issues and those integrations break down over time as your processes change. And the product, the Oracle eBusiness Suite, has an end of life of December of 2021. So they will stop providing full support of the product at that time. So what are we changing? So you're replacing your current Oracle EBS system. You're replacing some of the multiple ancillary software systems. You've got some reporting systems. You've got some custom applications that have been developed for things like budgeting. So those will all be replaced with a core ERP. You're moving away from the manual processes, using a lot of Excel spreadsheets. And right now you're currently hosting your system on-prem. you'll be moving to potentially a cloud solution or something that requires less of your internal support structure. So that will help with the cost and then the maintenance of the system moving forward. So we've got the ERP admin team working on this, your ITD infrastructure team. We've got payroll, we've got finance, including procurement and budget, human capital, and then all employees will be touched by this project because it will change the way they do their time reporting and their employee self-service portal. So all of that will be changing. So all employees will be getting some new training as we move forward into implementation. So briefly, the project's got 5 phases. The systems needs assessment is what we have wrapped up. I'll be showing you some details. Moving into the RFP development, then the selecting of the new vendor, moving forward with contract negotiations, and then beginning implementation. This also includes phase 0, which is project management, and that's all about the communications, the project plan and the project charter, and managing all of the status meetings and updates. So for the needs assessment for phase 1, we conducted over 40 interviews with a variety of staff. You can see the attendees included the listing at the bottom: special attendants, ILEDs, principals, human capital, finance, grants, and your technology team. So we completed 6 interviews with the specific technology infrastructure team to understand what their needs would be. We had 20 work sessions to define the functional requirements. That is, what do you want this new system to do? And in order to uncover that, we talk about what the current system does, what the current system does well, what the current system does poorly, what needs you have that are not covered by the current system. So we work through all those issues to define fully what your needs are in a new system moving forward. And then we developed some workflows that would identify how you would like your processes to work in the future. So we did those for a number of critical process areas. So right now we're in the RFP and selection phase. So to do that, we have some key tasks we work with. So we look at how are we going to pick the new solution. So that's defining our solution selection criteria. Then we develop and distribute an RFP. We're getting ready for that right now. We're hoping to get it out on the street for vendors to respond to in the coming weeks. You'll see more of that in the timeline. Once that comes back, we'll be doing a lot of robust work to analyze proposals, to have to determine out of, say, you might get 6 proposals, you might get 10 proposals, who are the real candidates that we want to move forward and invite in for vendor demonstrations. So we'll coordinate those. Due diligence activities will include things such as reference checking and potential site visits or virtual site visits, so you can see peers who are using the software in their districts. And then we will work through a final selection process to select the vendor you want to move forward with. The next phases then just are the contract negotiation, and then we begin the implementation phase. Just wanted to talk to you about the whole concept of a single solution versus a best of breed. So right now you have a best of breed approach. You've got a core ERP, but you have selected a number of other products that work in conjunction with your ERP. So you use a system K-12 buy, you use a number of employee evaluation tools, Performance Matters. So you've got some other software that you've integrated into your core ERP. So there'll be some decisions to make as we move through this and we see what the vendors can offer and see how functional that their products are. If you pick one ERP that will give you everything, there are some advantages. So you have a single set of data that you're using in the system. So the data is consistent, whether you're looking at it from a finance perspective or a human capital perspective, a procurement perspective, your timesheets, it's all the same data. It all belongs to the same solution set. It allows you to optimize your business processes because the data will flow freely. And again, it's the same set of data. Can help you improve reporting so that if finance is reporting something and human capital is reporting something, the data will be the same data set. So the reporting will be similar. Some of the downsides are that you've got one vendor, so you're picking one vendor, you're putting a lot of investment in with one vendor. If the implementation is problematic, it's the implementation of everything that's problematic. And some functionality may be weaker. So you may pick a procurement system that is good, but maybe not as good as what you've currently have. So are you willing to make that trade-off to have an integrated ERP versus a best of breed? With the best of breed, you can look at better functionality potentially. There are smaller software companies, and I only create software for employee evaluation. So I am going to have the best employee evaluation software out there, but that's all I do. So then you've got to pick other software to do every other aspect of human capital. So that would be, your advantage to have that better functionality. Again, the disadvantage is you've got multiple systems that you would have to support. Information is siloed. So in a system, they may use an employee number that isn't the same employee number that's used in a separate system. So you've got to make sure all of your data integrates appropriately. It can be more difficult, and it can sometimes cause data issues. You've got more vendors that you've got to manage, and it can sometimes be fragmented. All right, I think there was a slide I am missing. If you'll excuse me for a second, I'm going to get out of the slideshow. Not sure why these aren't showing, but I will show them outside of the slideshow. So the other piece we want to talk about is the whole concept of the different tiers of the vendors that you'll be looking at. And the reason it's important to understand this is there's a different cost that you'll see depending on which vendor you're looking at. Can you still see the slide even though it's not in the slideshow? All right.
Hey, Melissa, we can't see the slide.
You're not sharing your screen, Melissa.
Yeah, you're not sharing your screen right now, but also just to be mindful of time. I think the slide you're referring to is in the appendices, so we may just need to move forward.
Okay. All right, well, I will go back to the slideshow, and the next slide was just the, okay, so here we go. Let's see if I can share this. Share.
Melissa, if you want, I can present it and you can.
There we go. I think I've got it back up. Can you see that now?
Yes.
All right. So we talked about the single solution best of breed. The next slide that comes up in the slideshow is timeline. So this is the timeline that we're looking at. So we kicked the project off back in March. We have developed the functional specifications. We've created those process maps for the key process areas. We're currently working on the development of the RFP and the associated documents. We had anticipated releasing the RFP in early September. Right now where we stand is that is available. That won't be going out until late September. So it kind of pushes all of our other dates. We're looking
Melissa,
at.
you stop sharing your screen again.
I see it.
You see it? Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
I see it too.
Okay, never mind. Never mind.
All right, so we're looking at the RFP going out at the end of September, which means the proposals would come back from the vendor at the end of October. We'd be looking at doing the preliminary selection still in November, but it would be later in November. The vendor demonstrations would move to December, so we'd be doing those before the holiday break. And then looking at the final selection before or in late January or in February. So at that point, you would select the vendor you wanted to move forward with, do contract negotiations, and then begin the implementation process, which is most likely a 24-month period, could be 30 months depending on how the timing fits with the district needs. So that's all the slides I have in the deck. Any questions?
I'd like to open it up to the other commissioners on the line. Commissioner Frank, do you have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Commissioner Reed?
I'm just trying to figure out, we no longer have a head of technology, right? Chief Technology Officer, right?
No, we do not have a.
Yeah, we don't. The ERP work is, so Anand is one of the key staff people. Ty, who's on the phone, is one of the key staff people. And then Chris Doherty, CFO, is overseeing the ERP shift right now.
Okay, so it's going to be a team approach across disciplines that discerns what we see and when we see it, correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, led by the chief financial officer.
Okay, so Chris owns this?
With the support of Ty and Anand, and then obviously human capital is a key part of this team too.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Commissioner Bondima, do you have any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, I have one question. Once we do the final selection and onboarding of the potential vendor, will we get another timeline of what the actual implementation or rollout will look like within integrating the new system?
Yes. So the vendor you select will have an implementation that they recommend, then we will work with them to make sure it meets your needs. For example, if you've got a busy season, you may need longer time than they think you'll need. So we'll adjust those dates during the contract negotiation phase, and you'll have an implementation plan, again, most likely 24 to 30 months in duration.
Yes, also the rollout will be based on our city schools operational calendar.
Right, and Melissa, can you touch on the fact that we would probably have two rollouts, one to deal with core HC or human capital and one to deal with finance?
Absolutely. So most ERP implementations happen in two large phases. So the first one to go live is your finance, and along with your finance is procurement, because you need your general ledger structure out there in order for HR to go live. So that's typically the second piece. So finance would typically go live, and it usually happens on July 1st, so the start of a new fiscal year is when finance likes to implement. That would be ideal timing. So if they went live, say, July 1st of 2022, then it is likely that human capital and payroll would go live January 1st of 2023, because they like to go, payroll especially likes to go live on the start of a new calendar year because of taxes.
If there are no more questions, thank you so much, Ms. Miller.
Thank you.
We are now ready for the budget presentation.
Good day, everyone.
Good afternoon, Courtney.
How are you all doing? Can everyone see the calendar?
Yes.
All right. So the FY22 budget milestone calendar, it's our, I guess, official launch of the fiscal year 22 budget process. So it's a high-level calendar. It shows, some of the major dates for the budget process. Primarily, I would say the budget tool dates and the presentation dates, as well as some of the other milestones along the way. This calendar will look fairly similar to how it's looked in the last couple of years. There are a couple of things that we wanted to maintain. One of the things that you will notice, though, the enrollment adjustment process is sort of truncated into one line. Normally, we have it broken out by the different dates for the collaboratives and so forth. We are still in the process of figuring out exactly what that engagement looks like for this year being a little more complex than normal with regards to enrollment adjustments. In terms of the process, we know that we've had the community budget priority meetings over the last couple of years. So that's definitely something we want to maintain even in our current climate. We have a group that's working, a multifunctional group, different offices that's working through what that engagement looks like. Particularly right now, how we could leverage, the virtual platforms that we have available to maintain those engagements. Last year, if you recall, we did 4 primary community level engagements. We broke it down. We had like a community student engagement. We had one for our various partner groups like PCAD, CCAC, etc. We had one that was a multilingual engagement, which is very well intended, and we had a general engagement. So we want to maintain the format of sort of breaking it down into the groups that seem to have worked a lot better than the general engagements. But we're looking at how we can enhance those, and if there are any other groups that we need to be targeting for those school level and community level engagements. And like I said, we had played with the idea in the past of doing some of those virtually, whether it's like through Facebook Live, et cetera. So we now, I guess, are kind of forced, but in a good way to explore more virtual platforms and engagements for some of these activities. In terms of the dates, there are no major changes in the timeline. One of the things that you will see reflected is a 3-week period between the budget presentation and the budget vote, which reflects what we did last year. Prior to that, it had been about 2 weeks. So we are allowing more time for board engagement and questions and feedback on the budget between when it's initially presented and when it's finally voted on. Other than that, the dates are fairly similar to the milestone dates that we used last year. So are there any questions on the timeline?
I'd open it up for the rest of the commissioners. Commissioner Bondema.
No questions so far.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed.
I'm fine. Thank you.
I'm fine, thank you.
All right.
Sorry,
I can't hear you, Commissioner Roberts. You may be on mute.
Mute, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was actually muted at a very appropriate time. At last year's budget review process, we had discussed on having more components within the finalized budget to identify those targeted groups and where their priority areas were. Is that the time now to include what that would look like for the finished product in the spring? Because I know, let's just say, for an example, there were certain community asks and they were included in the larger budget, but it just wasn't easily identifiable in the finalized report.
Yes, no, I remember we had those discussions, and I would say it's never too early to start giving us that feedback and giving us that list of what it is you want to see or how you want to see it. The earlier we can incorporate that into our decision making and formatting, the better. So if you want, I don't know what method you'd prefer, if you want to set up, some time for us to kind of discuss it, or if you want to just send us a list of what you kind of have in mind and we flesh through it and work it out. Either way will work for us, but the earlier the better, I think, in order to make sure it's fully incorporated.
Great, because I think that I believe it was Commissioner Richardson and we both were on the same page with, the information and the dollars were included. It just wasn't broken out in a way for those specialized groups specifically to see where it had been included and their voices had been heard. And that's something we thought would be really helpful moving forward.
Yes, we thought that was excellent feedback. One of the things, as we had discussed at that time, was making sure that we identify the groups that you particularly want to see. So there are, 1,000 different ways we can kind of slice the pie in terms of funding, in terms of budget. So making sure we're pulling out the information that's most useful to you. So the earliest, like I said, that you can get us that information or how you want to see it, and we can kind of go back and forth and play with the ideas. And what we start off with might not be where it ends up. We might be able to flesh it up a little bit more. So just let us know where you want to start, and we can get going with it.
Perfect. Christian, could you note that, please?
Yes, absolutely. We also mentioned the ad hoc committee of commissioners to work on the budget book. So I can check in with the CEO staff to see when a good time for that would be.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Courtney.
No problem. Have a great day.
You too. It is now time for procurement.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Vogel, the Interim Director of Procurement. There are 9 items on the agenda for today. The first is a request to exercise the first of 2 one-year renewal options of a competitively solicited contract with BMC Services, Denver Ellick, the Poole and Kent Corporation, GE Tignal Company, and JF Fisher. They provide miscellaneous plumbing services at various city schools. The estimated annual renewal amount is $2 million. The board initially approved the contract on October 24 of 2017, and it has a contract term of October 25 of 2017 through October 24 of 2020. The renewal period contract term will be October 25 of 2020 through October 24 of 21, and then it includes still one more remaining renewal option. The next item is a request to exercise the first of 2 one-year renewal options of a competitively solicited contract with Colossal Contractors and Tito Contractors. The contract provides door and frame repair replacement services at city schools. The estimated annual renewal amount is $100,000. The board initially approved the contract on October 24 of 2017, and it has a contract term of October 25 of 2017 through October 24 of 2020. The renewal period will be October 25 of 2020 through October 24 of 2021, and it has one remaining renewal option. Next item is to exercise the first of 2 one-year renewal options of a competitively solicited contract with Colossal Contractors and Tito Contractors. This contract provides painting and minor repair renovation services at city schools. The estimated annual renewal amount is $3 million. The board initially approved the contract on October 24 of 2017, and it has a contract term of October 25 of 2017 through October 24 of 2020. The renewal period contract term is October 25 of 2020 through October 24 of 2021, and it has a 1-year remaining renewal option. The next item is to exercise the first of 2 one-year renewal options of a competitively solicited contract with Alliance Exterior Construction, Cole Roofing, and Simpson of Maryland. This contract provides roofing system services at city schools. The estimated annual renewal amount is $600,000. The board initially approved the contract on October 24 of 2017. It has a contract term of October 25 of 2017 through October 24 of 2020. The renewal period contract term will be October 25 of 2020 through October 24 of 21, and it has another 1-year remaining renewal option.
Commissioner Bundy, I just have one question, please. Does this, and you might have it listed somewhere, just as out of curiosity, does this include Evanston West Side's roofing? Would you know?
Not sure. Blaine, are you on the call?
This is Blaine Lipsky. What's more specifically, what is the question as far as the roof?
Okay, good, because I have been visiting Evanston West Side for a couple of years, and the principal there has been, he mentioned that he had put in a request for roofing. Did I go blank?
Well, no, your face is still there. You're visual. The roofing would be a complete CIP project.
Okay,
We do provide repairs and maintenance when there are problems identified in individual rooms and such. And there are some areas of concern that have been elevated to review to design and construction for a larger project.
okay.
And
No, I was, okay, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying is that we are aware of it, but that would be it. This is for maintenance and repair,
Okay.
not replacement unless it's an emergency of a
Mhm.
small roof. But that large roof at Edmondson West Side would be a large capital project.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I was
Sure.
just curious when that would happen, because when I visit that school, I've been up there several times for different events, and it was indicated to me that they've been trying to get a new roof for quite a while.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a question that I can put into Christian that we can find out later.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we would like to move forward with later, or as a complete renovation, to do the roof, the windows, and doors as a systemic project, as Cindy explained earlier. And I'll get you some more information on the roof.
Okay, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
The next item is to exercise the first of two one-year renewal options of a competitively solicited contract with Sparks Quality Fence. And the contract provides fencing repair and installation services at city schools. The estimated annual renewal amount is $100,000. The board initially approved the contract on October 24 of 2017, and it has a contract term of October 25 of 2017 through October 24 of 2020. The renewal period term will be October 25 of 2020 through October 24 of 2021, and it has an additional 1 year remaining renewal option. The next item is a competitively solicited contract with 12 contractors to provide on-call engineering consulting services. The estimated contract amount is $18 million. The contract term is October of 2020 through September 30 of 2023. And the contract includes one 2-year renewal option.
Joe, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And it kind of relates to the on-call engineering in the next one, so 15.06 and 15.07 maybe. So I know we use a mandated formula to calculate the MBE and WBE goals. Can you just help me to understand, because we see this every now and again, how some of the vendors, they literally hit the target goals like on target. How do they get the very specific 37, 27, 10? With the exception of a few, and it goes for the architectural consulting services as well, all of them have the goal on target. It's no true deviation, except for a couple. But how do they make the goal on target?
Well, they haven't made the goal at this point. The goals are set at, on this one, 27% MBE and 10% WBE. What they are saying at this point in time is that they agreed to meeting those goals. And in their submittals, when they submit to city schools, they have identified who the MBE and WBE subcontractors are that they're going to use. And at this point, they're agreeing to get to the 27 and 10. On some of the vendors have actually exceeded our goal. Several of them have said they will meet at a higher rate. And at those, they've also submitted who the MBE, WBE subs they will be using. And we won't know that until the project, as it goes through, as to exactly when they hit the numbers. It depends on the trades that they are using to get to the end of the project.
Oh, okay. So I think my confusion lies where it says in the area for MBE, WE results is the language that says the actual results were. To me, that implies.
Right, the actual result of the solicitation.
Okay.
May I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely, go for it, Commissioner Reed.
Okay. Getting back to procurement items number 6 and number 7. I guess engineering, 18 people, you ended up with 12. Architectural 21, you ended up with 10. I guess my question is there a template that you use for the whole process, procedure, decision-making for things that come through procurement? Is it like, because I'm looking at, it's going to take it's a daunting amount of time to go through over 20 basic proposals.
Yes,
So,
it is.
So I guess, are we cognizant of the procedure and principles you guys use at the boilerplate that we can look at and say, oh, we understand the iterations that procurement area goes through? Because it gets back to, a question I could have as a citizen, because it makes me realize, especially going forward, in periods of uncertainty, which I see happening in the next couple of years, and reduced funding, how can we really tightly scrutinize the whole process in terms of procurement?
In each solicitation that City Schools does, and these two are no exception, what we do, we select an evaluation committee that involves anywhere from as few as 3 people to as many as whatever the complexity of the solicitation has. We also then extract from the specifications from the solicitation those things that we are trying to accomplish, and we set up evaluation criteria that the evaluation committee then compares all the respondents to what the criteria is and ranks them. And at the end of the day, this is a short explanation, at the end of the day then we have a matrix of how we got to where each of these guys stand. And then it's the committee that then decides in these types of things whether we're going to pick 4 vendors or 20 vendors, depending on the complexity and the volume of work that we may think we may see in the future. So yes, there is a there is an evaluation process, sir.
Okay. Look at 6 and 7. 6 and 7, you're going to have this on a rotating basis. So
yes.
So the size of the contracts are 10 million, and I can't remember the other. Both are pretty daunting. But I guess the question is, say I'm a vendor and I come up, my time up, the contract's only for $10,000, and the previous 2 were like for $1 million. So how do you create a level playing field when you have a process that's rotating?
Joe, can I answer?
Yes, you can. Oh, you're here? I thought you weren't here. Good, okay.
Sorry, I have to present at the city on the CIP in just a minute, but I'll try to answer. So first of all, we are limited to fees of only $200,000 each under these contracts. Okay. So vendor A, for example, that previous one can only be $200,000 max.
Okay, got you. Okay.
Vendor B, you're right, it might only be $10,000, right. But we do try, because it's the rotating, it's very odd to have that kind of difference though in the design projects that we're doing, to have that much of a difference between them.
Okay. But there is a limit.
There is a limit of $200,000 per project.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay. So great segue. The next one is on-call architectural consulting services. And that's a contract to award to 10 different contractors. The total contract amount is $10 million. And the contract term is October 1 of 2020 through September 30th of 2023. And it includes 1 2-year renewal option. The next item is a request to increase the contract with WB Mason by an additional $900,000 annually. And the contract provides general supplies, most recently personal protection equipment. The board originally approved the agreement on July 28 of 2020, It has a contract term of July 29, 2020 through July 28 of 2021. And then the last item.
I have a question about that, Madam Chair.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So this was the company that I think we had awarded, or the recommendation was to award a $4 or $6 million contract based on a Baltimore County piggyback process, and it did not include any MWBE. I think you guys went back in July and broke it down to an initial request of the $600,000 that we see here. I'm still curious, we're still using the piggyback as the procurement, sort of the process. This time you added a potential goal, although not a requirement, that they try to achieve participation of 10% minority or women-owned companies. I can't remember which or both. I'm curious if that was required in the $600,000 contract and whether they achieved it, and why we're making this a goal, or I forget how it's actually described, as opposed to a requirement. And the last question is this the only company, I guess by not including MWB participation as a requirement, we've assumed somewhere within the process that this particular procurement does not have minority women-owned participants that can provide the services that the district is looking for. And so we're going outside that process. Is that in fact what we've concluded, that there are no companies out there that are minority or women-owned that can either participate at a subcontracting basis for something like this?
What WB Mason's contract with Baltimore County is that it's not a goal quite like Baltimore City uses, but they have in their contract that they will attempt to get to 15%. The types of products that we have been buying up to this point from WB Mason had been personal protection equipment for COVID. And most of what we've been buying to date have not been coming from companies that are producing the product in the United States. These products are coming from overseas. So yes, there is extremely very limited, if any, MBE potential when we're buying products from overseas that comes in to WB Mason, and then they simply send it to us. So this one is a little bit different, sir, you're right.
Commissioner Frank, this is Blaine again. The conversations we've had with WB Mason managers has been that they will attempt to work with minority firms on the school-based items, and as well as trying to work with a drop ship program outside of their normal delivery service to the schools as direct purchasing. Now, as Joe mentioned, the larger PPE items, such as the acrylic barriers, the trifolds, and other items, have been from a warehouse distribution system, direct shipped directly to the from the manufacturer to the school supply chain. But however, the individual school orders can be channeled through minority firms, as well as smaller attempt to get transportation to the site itself.
Thanks, that's helpful. My only last comment is, if we could not necessarily wait for a year to get a report on how they're doing on their voluntary goal to achieve some of these minority participation companies.
Yeah. One of the other concerns that we've noted is that due to the WB Mason throughout the state of Maryland, they have more of a buying power to offer us the degree of discounts that a minority business may not be able to afford prior to. They may not have the resources to provide us the quantities up front until we receive, and then they're paid for the services, because we can't pay them up front to procure the systems or the quantities. So that's of concern as well. So we're leveraging WB Mason's money until we get our supplies, unlike what a minority company may not be able to afford at this current COVID operation.
So this is Lynette Washington. Commissioner Frank, one of the other things that I also want to make sure that I mention is that the team is still exploring other options too, right? WB Mason right now is providing us with consistent supply of services. And so it is not like this is the end all. Our teams are still going to continue to explore if there are other MBE suppliers. But at this time, where we are setting up small in-person groups and some of those different things like that, this is providing us with the necessary service. We've had 2 other vendors who also have not been able to meet our deadlines and our turnaround time in order for us to be able to maintain our inventory. So this is something that we are doing not as a permanent fix, but it's for right now, as we can continue to get our PPE supplies in so that, you know, we're supporting our staff and our students in our schools, but we're going to still continue to explore other vendors to support this effort.
Hi, this is Commissioner Bundima here. Thank you, Dr. Washington. I just want to add this in here, and that's really, really important. And I want to say this so that we can not just throw it out there one time only, and you're probably already doing it. It is really important that when we bring all of these companies in and we contract with these companies, and a lot of the companies that we bring in, we see the names all the time. Do we keep a record of, and I would like for this documented, do we keep a record of the work that these companies do with MBEs to see if they do make a big effort to bring minority contractors in on the work? Because we throw this out and then it goes away. I would be very curious to know, and I think others would as well, to know when we say that they're exploring exploring looking at minority contractors to work with them, that they're actually doing it, and if we have a record of if these companies are actually doing it, because we need to know for future contracts when we bring these big organizations in, if they are sticking to their word of bringing MBEs in on the projects. Do we do that? And if we're not doing it, I really would wonder why we're not doing it.
Great question. Yes, we are doing that. I don't see Mike Smith, the MBE office, represented today, but the MBE section does do that on a regular basis, and you know, Mike can certainly speak to that in a different time frame. I can certainly have them send you something, Commissioner.
I would love to see something, because board members at different times and other members of the system get comments from contractors that say that there was a contract out there and could be true or not true, that they didn't see it, or they weren't a part of it, or they were rejected, or in this part where they said that they would make a special effort to include minority contractors, and you hear contractors say, that's not true, we never heard a word. I really would like to see these big organizations to show evidence that they have included, and this just, it's not me just talking, it won't go away. We need to make some changes, and if it's, you know, if there is a problem, and if you're already doing it, then there isn't a problem.
Yes, I will share that question with the MBE office, and I will have them send you something, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And Joe, this is Christian. I believe we had this conversation previously. Wasn't there some conversation about at the contract closeout, they kind of look at if they met their goals, and if they don't, there's some kind of adjustment? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I hate to be speaking for them, but yes, there is a process. Throughout the contract term, the contractors, the primes, are supposed to be sending reports to the MBE office, so that the MBE office does keep track of where the primes are. And at the end of a contract, we do a closeout. And if a vendor is a prime, if a prime does not meet the goal that they said they would, there are liquidated damages that City Schools does implement. So there is a negative situation if a prime does not meet their goals, and it's a monetary situation. So it's imperative that they do, otherwise they will lose money at the end of the contract. So thanks, Christian. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. The last item on the agenda today is a request to contract with 18 community-based organizations to provide community school lead agency services at 84 of our schools. The contract amount is $4,346,420, and the contract term is July 1 of 2020 through June 30th of 2021. And that wraps up the procurement agenda for today.
Were there any last questions since we have a few minutes before our quitting time? No? Thank you so much, Joe.
Well, you're welcome. Everyone be safe.
You too. Thank you. That concludes today's operations meeting. The next meeting will take place on October the 20th, and the presentations for that day will be the budget update, transportation update, and district-wide recruitment. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.